right, welcome everybody. My name is Lucian and I would like to say thank you for joining. Thank you our speakers, thank you our panelists, and thank you to the sponsors. I'd like to invite our moderator, Kevin O'Donovan, to take the floor. Thank you, Kevin, for supporting.
Thank you, Lucian, and welcome everybody to day 2 here at the IIoT World Days. And thanks for joining us for our roundtable discussion on the topic, using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production. As Lucian said, my name is Kevin O'Donovan. I'll be the moderator for the next 50 minutes or so, and I'm delighted to be joined by a truly worldwide panel today, and you'll hear that in a few minutes. Now, before we do the introductions, an overview of our agenda and a quick bit of housekeeping. This roundtable is sponsored by Uniper, and it's part of the digital transformation for energy and utilities track that's running throughout this entire event. Now, over the course of the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to dig into the topic and level set up front on what using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production is all about, because it can mean many things to many people. And then we'll dive into some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and get the views and opinions of the panel. Now, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A icon. So for any of you out there, if you have any questions, please type your question into the Q&A tool. It can be for a particular speaker, it can be just for the panel in general. You'll also have a chat function. Now, you can chat with other attendees behind the scenes. Feel free. Just be aware that the 4 of us will be focused on the Q&A function. We won't be watching what's going on in chat. And as Lucian said, for those of you that were in it a few minutes ago, IIoT World, for those of you that are most active today in asking questions, then all of your names will be entered into a draw for a copy of The Future is Faster Than You Think, the book by Peter Diamandis. And last thing, we're recording the session, and all of the sessions from the entire event will be available for all the registered attendees for on demand in the next couple of days. So with that, let's go meet our panel for today. And first up, Pete Davies from Uniper over in the UK. Pete.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon where I am, and good evening to other colleagues on the panel. Pete Davies, I like to kind of intro myself as a father, proud dyslexic and digital engineer. I've worked in the energy industry for the last 12 years. Prior to that in the pharmaceutical industry, always on that boundary between the operation and IT, be it engineering, trading or generation. So I hope to share some good experiences that have been positive and negative over the last 12 years with the colleagues here, and look forward to the panel.
Thanks, Pete. Next up, we have Brett Milne from Carrot, from the other side of the planet, the east coast of Australia.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, my name is Brett Milne. I'm from the Gold Coast in Australia. It's 11 p.m. here, so it's a great time to be doing this. I run a virtual power plant business called Carrot, but for my sins, I spent a few years in the telecommunication industry, a few years in the energy industry, and a couple of software startups. So I'm really excited by the topic that we're discussing tonight and the opportunities that present us in digitizing the energy industry.
Thanks, Brett. And now we're switching, same hemisphere, but on the other side, Dalton Oliveira from Watson Consulting. Dalton.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor to share knowledge and listen to the other experts. First of all, I'd like to thanks to Lucian, Carol, IIoT World staff and sponsors, of course. And again, I'm happy to be here with you guys. From my background, I'm an electronics engineer, and I'm working as a global digital transformation consultant. I used to work for 10 years for international companies, international projects, mission critical ones. And I have experience in government here in Brazil. I worked for 5 years in the São Paulo state government. And that's it. Let's talk about IIoT and how this can improve our lives and customers' lives too.
Perfect. Well, as you can see, we're certainly covering the different corners of the globe. My name is Kevin O'Donovan. I spend my time looking at technologies within the energy industry. But for the next, whatever, 40 minutes is to moderate the discussion with these gentlemen. And obviously, let's see if we can get any arguments or anything going as well. Keep it a bit fun. So, you know, when we talk about using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production, I've been in the IT world for most of my career, and most people will be going, "Oh God, digitalization, here we go again." And yeah, there's many benefits, but a lot of them haven't been reached, and it's hard, and whatever. There's lots of projects start and they don't end up, but it means many things to many people. And then we've had the consequences of the past crisis over the past number of months, where digitalization has been turned on its head and come to the fore in many things. So what we wanted to do up front was level set across the panel on what this means to us in terms of using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production. And that's from generating the energy, how we consume it, and everything in the middle. So Pete, if I may, what does using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production mean in your world?
So in my day-to-day world, at the moment in Uniper, we operate around 34 gigawatts of assets of nearly all generating types. We have clients around the world, and we're effectively monitoring the condition performance of those power stations. So for us, digitalization is really the extension of everything that we have learned in mainland Europe and on our own assets, particularly with regards to delivering the energy transition, so flexible generation, deployment, building of renewables, etc. And taking that knowledge that is effectively been built by people, turning that into software and solutions that helps the rest of the world get quickly through their energy transition, because I think we all believe and know that we need to do that faster than it has in the past. So really it's a way of extending knowledge to the rest of the world and help them in their transition.
Okay. And Dalton, when we were chatting in the weeks before this, you had brought up the whole thing that, you know, well, to optimize power production, you need to map it with the demand. So how does this tie in with the consumption into the world?
This is a great question, Kevin, because when we have, I used to divide this subject in production, distribution, and consumption, right? From all the perspectives, I think we have a lot of details to deal with when we talk about digitalization, because the first thing came to mind when we talk about digitalization is, from my perspective, management. When we have more data that can be transformed into information, we can transform this into knowledge for better decision making. Even if we were talking about production or distribution or consumption, because for example, from the perspective of IoT verticals, we are dealing with a lot of verticals, not only Industry 4.0. And we have some use cases that I already have the chance to work with. We have industry, we have buildings, smart buildings, we have smart cities, everything working together. And this is the beauty when we talk about digitalization, because we are not talking about one subject only, we are talking about a multidisciplinary thing.
That is true. And Brett, I suppose, I think many of the folks here would be familiar with the whole concept of a virtual power plant, but just in case some aren't, where does this fit into power production and keeping everything running?
Well, as in Australia, for example, we've got penetration rates of rooftop solar in the low 30s, high 20s in most of our regional areas. And as that penetration takes off and gets paired with storage and other devices, stability becomes an issue. You now have a whole range of organisations, whether they be mums and dads or large commercialisations, who are now makers, not just takers of energy. And so getting the balance right about how those operate is important. But now you've got thousands upon thousands of energy assets generating and storing energy that you didn't have before. You know, you had a couple of dozen power stations, pretty easy to keep track of those, make sure they're online. When you've got thousands and thousands of millions of customers participating, keeping track of that, knowing it's online, knowing for certainty what your production and your storage capacity is, how that's going to impact your market becomes a critical factor. You can only do that through digitization. So you need to be able to manage the data and get it into a format where you can use it for forecasting, analysis, and even driving actions to respond to changes in frequency, changes in demand, etc.
Okay. So I suppose if I sum it up, it's everything from what we would traditionally think about, well, let's use digital tools to generate energy more efficiently. But generation today is, yeah, there are the big power plants that we all know and love, and there are all the distributed energy resources all over the place that are generating electricity as well. So they need to be tied into the puzzle. And then you have the whole piece with Dalton in terms of, yeah, but it depends on the demand. So how do you balance demand and supply and then you have software tools, I suppose, all the way along that food chain to be able to optimize bits and pieces all the way along. Now, I suppose one of the things I've learned from being in the IT industry for many years is that people say, that's great and the technology is wonderful. But if it was so easy, how come everyone hasn't done all this before? So if I may, from all of your different vantage points, if it was so easy, why aren't people doing it? What are the challenges that we've faced in terms of getting or using digitalization tools to make this more efficient up to now? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. One of the challenges is there's no real standards. So in terms of how you deploy these assets out into the world, there are standards, but they're loose. Unlike the telecommunications industry where GSM or 3G or 4G are very well defined and easy to integrate new devices, it's not so easy in the energy world. So adding new devices into a virtual power plant or adding new devices into the market becomes somewhat subject to any rules apply. Yes, there are rules about safety, there are rules about energy performance, but they don't necessarily talk to each other. They don't necessarily integrate easily. And so then bringing lots and lots of devices online becomes quite complex. So that's one of the barriers. The other barriers is, to date, there hasn't been a lot of policy around how this happens in a market. Now, the market was generate, distribute, sell, but now that's a different world where you've got generation happening at both ends of the chain. And so how do you create a policy framework to enable this whole new world to evolve? Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would agree, particularly with the last part from Brett, because the policies and the market mechanisms need to be in place to enable that. And I don't want this to turn into a lobbying session, but that's the reality of the situation. In some countries in the world, things are getting pretty interesting and advanced. In the UK, they released the enhanced frequency response market. Capacity markets are in place where you can come in with demand response with virtual power plant models. And in fact, some of you might be aware that Tesla got a license for VPPs in the UK, which that could be a very interesting situation when you've effectively got units that consume roughly what a household would consume moving around the grid. So the market mechanisms need to change. The other thing I'd say, if I look at the scale of retail all the way through to power generation, retail, there is quite a good bit being done in the sense of understanding customers, clustering, understanding behavior, all of that kind of stuff that's pretty well understood, taken from the rest of the retail industry. But you go the far extreme down onto the generation side, you're talking about pretty large, dangerous assets in most cases when we're talking about large spinning things. So when you take that in mind, the level of risk that we can afford to take and continue to run these things safely is a lot lower. And the quality of our accuracy needs to be much higher. So you can't just cluster your customers and get it 80% right on a power plant. You've got to be 95, 99% right. And still then you're going to put a human in the way to make that final call, which links to the point Dalton was raising around it being decision support. So for me, the risk profiles basically get higher and higher as you move along that spectrum. And that's one of the reasons it hasn't, for me, reached the propagation that we've maybe seen in the consumer sector for other industries.
Okay. And Dalton, from your side?
Yeah, from my perspective, we have some main points as a challenge, correct? Not in this sequence, but the mindset. The mindset. Let's face something we are facing now. The pandemic thing makes us work from home and do these meetings like that and events and most of things digitally. And for me, for example, this is completely normal because once I already have the experience since my past background to work with projects worldwide, for me it's completely common and to work with the digital platforms and apps, like doing meetings using Zoom, Meeting, things like that. And the main challenge, what I mean is the mindset, the way that the things can be integrated, the legacy stuff, the legacy thing, and the main thing I used to tell people. For example, for my partners and me as a consultant, I want to provide you a solution. I'd like to hear your problem to provide your solution. Okay. And this kind of challenge and the main thing, the mindset, is something we needed to work on.
Okay. Now, I spend most of my time looking at technology and gadgets and stuff everywhere. And my usual get out of jail clause is the technology is the easy bit. And Brett, you mentioned about the fact that we need standards. My own personal thing is that we don't need more standards. We probably have too many standards because everyone's got a different standard, and the question of joining the dots. And the other thing that I find fascinating with optimizing this end to end is everybody needs the other players' data. And sometimes what I've seen is that getting consumer data and mixing it in with the back-end big systems data and whatever, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And you have privacy, cybersecurity, who's going to monetize the data, who owns the data. That can also be another, what would I say, can of worms. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with you around we need simpler standards, absolutely. And I also think that there needs to be some level of democracy of data to enable the system to run effectively. And yes, you need the opportunity to monetize that, but you also need the opportunity to democratize it so that the right data can be made available to those who need to make decisions. For example, there's been a movement in the energy industry to shift ownership of data back to customers to some extent, or to the retailer, away from the network companies. But the network companies still need to understand that data so that they can operate their business. And so you need some level of democratization of that data so that people can effectively make sure that we have a stable operating environment in the industry. And so that's the real challenge, is how do you enable that level of data to be shared, but also enable people to create value from the data that is being created or being recorded and stored.
Okay. Pete, any thoughts? Because I know you guys look at a lot of data.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've been doing advanced condition monitoring or whole plant monitoring, machine learning for over 10 years. So what I would say, for me, my knowledge base is very strong in things that are large generating assets or large wind farms. So let's say units above 25 megawatts. Now, if I think about those, there's generally not enough of them in the energy system for them to be unidentifiable. What I mean by that, it's not like hundreds of meter endpoints on a network or hundreds, thousands of homes. So when you then start thinking about, okay, so if I start to make my data open, even with some anonymization, anyone with the know of that industry for those assets above 25 megawatts in the country is probably going to be able to identify whose asset that is. And then when you get into that space, you start entering, when you come down to the trading side, you start entering into what are called REMIT, EMIR laws, etc., which are all around coming from the financial crash and other aspects. That basically you can gain a strategic advantage by understanding what's happening to your competitors' assets. And then you can make significant amounts of money. And we saw that in the UK. None of this is, when I saw that, there was no illegal activity, be clear about that. But what we saw in the power price peaks is that, I think it was March 2018, a boat went, no, that's it, there was 2 French nukes that were pulled offline because of integrity issues on the plant. And that was all unplanned. And France is generally a net exporter to the UK. And which basically meant we had to swing 8 gig in the UK because of the 4 gig connector turned into an export to France. And that caused the prices in the UK to shoot up 10, 20-fold, and some assets were getting thousands of pounds a megawatt hour. Now, if you'd known that and you'd understood the default was coming or something, you could have made even more money from that situation. So understanding the faults, the integrity of the condition of these assets is financially extremely valuable for those moments. And that, for that reason, I don't think you will get democratization of data on large scale assets unless the assets are all owned by the government and it's opened up. But for networks, for retail side, I think it's almost a must because it's more around grid stability. And that is an important part of the energy transition. It's not just CO2, it's the stability of the networks.
Okay. Dalton, is the ownership of the data and data privacy more of a consumer issue then as well?
Yeah, around this subject is a great question because we can use that famous phrase, the data is the new oil. It's the common phrase we are hearing nowadays. And from the perspective, from my experience, we needed to deal with the policies, with data integration, with the legacy and things like that. But what I've been seeing is even the customer itself, each department are, how can I say that? Not fighting, but between the departments, they need a kind of layer that department A cannot see the data gathered, collected, or generated by the department B for a big company solution. And this kind of thing, it's a challenge, not for the project perspective, but for all involved, because when we see the project in the umbrella thing, in the digital transformation, we needed to be transparent with all those data from all the perspectives, all the departments, and sometimes it does not happen. And that's the thing. Who owns the data?
Okay. Now let me play devil's advocate here as a technology guy. You know, Pete, on your example, what happened in France with the nukes coming off and whatever, but somehow the technology worked, right? So the light stayed on, and even with, I have way more smart home devices than I need because I get them and buy them and whatever. So I plug them all together and they work and whatever. And to Brett's point as well, can I say that technology is not the problem here in digitalization? Maybe it's the mindset, or maybe it's the lack of regulation to create markets that allow me to use the technology and use the digitalization that I have. Is that fair? Or, you know, okay, so there are cybersecurity issues. There are, let's say, too many standards or lack of defined standards. But in terms of technologies and digital, are we missing stuff, or is it other problems?
I think mindset is kind of nails it, to be honest, because your mindset drives your policy. So in the examples I gave around large scale generation, saying it won't happen for large scale generation for the time being, because the market is set up in a way that enables trading of those assets under those markets. But if you have a different market mechanism, then maybe you could open up how people are compensated, and therefore those aspects don't become as valuable. So yeah, it has to come down to mindset fundamentally at the end.
Yeah, I also think there's a maturity of that mindset. So people closer to the coalface tend to understand the issues more than the policymakers. And so getting the policymakers' mindset up to understanding where the market or where the opportunities at is a significant challenge. You know, a commercial organisation will see an opportunity and proceed with it, but the policy will often be, and the legal framework will often be a fair way behind that necessarily coming to the fore. So the mindset of the policymakers needs to create flexible market structures to enable these new business models to evolve.
Okay. Dalton, your thoughts?
Yeah, as I told you guys before, the mindset is the main thing. And of course, we needed to deal with cybersecurity, user data privacy, and of course, the policymakers. Currently, I'm working on a project in Europe, and we are dealing with something based on satellite data. And once this project is dealing with different continents, and people from legal department are dealing with different perspective of the project, that the data is collecting in one region that's being used in another region, and it's managing by another region. And understand, it's a complex transition of those data. And as we are talking about mindset, and I'd like to add one more thing. Great use cases, not the mindset only, but great use cases, and how to deal with this kind of punctual thing that we are not dealing with satellite data in most of the projects, but in few of them. And the policymakers, of course, need to deal with these subjects that are not that common.
Okay. Just a couple of bit of housekeeping here for those of you listening. There's no question so far, and as there's going to be a giveaway for the person who asks the most questions. Right now, one would qualify. So if you have a question, please type it in.
It'd be good to know also if people are actually hearing us.
I would hope so. Yeah, someone type a question, say, yes, we hear you. That we'll count that one. Well, we would have probably got a message saying, right, moving on. If I may, when so Peter Orban, he hears us, so good. One of the things, and maybe it's back to mindset, and some of it was around, let's say, digitalization technologies. And as I say, I spent my career selling technology into the industry. And there'd always be, oh, that's really cool, and we'll do that, and we'll have an innovation team over here, and they'll do an innovation project, and we'll come back to them in 5 years' time and see what they did, but don't touch my core network, because that'll never work. And I suppose one of the good, bad things from the current crisis is that a lot of that thinking, the mindset has been turned over on its head in terms of remote access or remote working or the troubleshooting power plants with the guy on a smartphone with FaceTime, whatever. Have any of you seen the mindset in terms of we have to move faster, we have to do more digitalization? Has that accelerated in your worlds in the past couple of months?
In our space, definitely. So a lot of our clients are large commercials who have multiple sites that they're trying to connect up as a virtual power plant. And the CEOs and senior technical and financial people in those organizations are definitely keen as they roll out these assets across their rooftops and their factories and their businesses. They're definitely keen to understand the return on investment that they're getting. And as a consequence, they need access to the digital footprint of those assets and how they're being utilized and the return and the value that's being created. So there's certainly been a shift at that level in organizations to see how they can apply these technologies into their business models. So that certainly has happened.
Okay. Pete or Dalton?
It's definitely changed the thing. So if you think about people's mindset, what does it? We're all talking about change here, which is a very philosophical subject. But if you think about what's happened now, effectively a problem has been created, and people are forced to find the solution, and that problem is suffering or positively suffering from information bias. So it's immediate, and therefore I've got to deal with it now. And that's when you start, for me, to see change. So if I take an example of how to change things in our industry, you need to start looking at what problems does an asset have? What problems or opportunities does a business have? And not say, I've got digital technology that's going to solve this. Really focus on shaping and understanding that problem. Because when you've understood it, you can then say, actually, I might have a digital solution for that, or I might not. There's been a great, somebody put something on LinkedIn the other day of an Indian onion farmer, and they had 2 tracks of like wood that went down like this, and it was a sizing. Yeah, sorts them. And you could just imagine someone coming with a digital solution, weighing things, etc., and trying to work it all out. But this just does it faster. The point I'm making is the problem needs to be immediate to people. They need to be suffering information bias. It's there all the time. When that happens, you will get change. And that's, for me, exactly what's happening under COVID. Is what we're seeing as a business. All our existing clients, our work has gone up with those clients because they need more remote support, more understanding of what's happening with their asset, because the experts aren't on site every day. And I expect from the back of this, then people will become more used to it. And I think a lot of people were saying it's now the new norm, working from home and working in other locations. And then people start saying, why do I need to travel around the world to do everything I need to do? So when that happens, we have to put more digital tools in place. We are putting more digital tools in place, and I expect the world will grow and get better from here, to be honest, or at least I hope.
Dalton, and any positive things coming out of the crisis?
Yes. One thing that I think it's important for this kind of thing is that let me tell you based on an example. Most of times, the client required to me some solution, and based on that scope, I have to look beyond that, because when we are talking about collecting data and providing information and things like that, from my perspective, I always like to with those data that we are collecting, bring more value than the client is waiting for. For example, I was required to work with Industry 4.0 project. And from that base information, I suggested the client to extract information and value from those data to bring information for facilities management, for example. And those data could bring value for the business in another way, not for the final customer only, but for the internal customer, the client itself, that could bring more value for the business, and the innovation department could bring another project based on that. Of course, it's kind of confusing talking this way, but unfortunately, I can open what's happening. But
Okay.
one thing, the main thing is to not work on the problem only, but extract value from the problem and the data gathered to solve that problem, because you can solve another kind of a problem that the client is not seeing at that time, but he can see, for example, in the near future.
Okay. Now the questions are flying in here. I've opened up a Pandora's box. So let me take a couple of them. And for those of you that are asking the questions, I've just marked a couple of them that we're going to answer live. So I'm just going to start asking those ones to the panel now. So one technology one, I suppose that's close to my heart because I'm a fan of blockchain. Where do you guys see blockchain fitting in here? Is this a technology looking for a problem, or has it a solution?
I think there is a role for it. I think it'll relate to the business models that evolve as more renewable and more distributed energy is permeated out through the grids, particularly in spaces where you've got peer-to-peer type trading environments, microgrids, for example. But the path will be difficult for blockchain because you've got an embedded history and rule set around markets that make it difficult for blockchain to make sense in some instances. And so it's one of those policy questions. How do you move through from an existing policy framework to enable the reconciliation and ledger capabilities of blockchain to facilitate peer-to-peer trading? And I think that's, well, it's easy in a microgrid because you've pretty much got a sealed world. But once you step out of the microgrid into the broader energy space, then you've got the challenge of the existing market frameworks and settlement methodologies that you have to overcome. And so I think there's definitely value to be had there, but it's a path that has to be framed around the direction of the markets and the policy frameworks of the markets.
No, that's valid, because I say I am a fan of blockchain technology. It's not the answer to every solution or every problem, but for certain energy trading certificates, microgrids, VPPs, whatever. And then you see in Australia, you guys have been ahead on some of that. There's transmission system operators in Europe using blockchain for EV charging. So people are using it, but I do think it comes back to the fundamental. Here in Europe, we're looking at energy communities, but I can sell and that's European policy, but I can't sell my energy in France to my neighbor because that's illegal, because the legislation doesn't fit in. Peter, quick one here on the role of, excuse me, I'm trying to find it here now because questions are flying. It was around Microsoft Azure and IoT platforms. Do they play into the world?
Yeah, I think there's probably one experience it's worth me sharing on blockchain. So before we jump up, because we actually have used blockchain at Uniper for power trading. And there's two issues. Power trading is time orientated. So it's not like an oil or a coal commodity that you can store. It has to be executed at a certain point. And that gives a bit of a technical issue. We've actually found the transaction speed to be too slow in a number of cases. So we looked at it for short-term trading, but at this moment in time, it's too slow. So I think that's worth sharing with some of the audience as to, it's not there yet. If you couple that with the market issues, then it's still got a long way to go. But in answer to the IIoT question and platforms, they certainly have a place to play. So if you think about the world's energy transition, we've gone from a kind of very regimented, large-scale generation, pushes stuff out to the transmission operator, to the grid, hits people's homes. That world is massively changing. The UK gets to 60% renewables penetration on some days, particularly during COVID. So you've now got the broad set of what we call unreliable or inconsistent generation, and rightfully we take it first always. So then the grid has got to kind of deal with this imbalance situation. Plus you've got people at home with a ton of solar or behind the meter other generations. So you've kind of got this system that starts to swing around a lot, which means that effectively the classic models where stuff was passed down the chain and you could effectively organize businesses by groups of people and disciplines means the value is between the disciplines all of a sudden, not within the discipline, because it's about decisions you make on the boundaries between those disciplines. And that means pooling your data together in a data lake or a IIoT platform is actually presents some value. However, what I would say is don't try and put everything in first and don't do anything with it, i.e. don't think about the end use in the sense that you've got to pick targets of what you're trying to solve. Because if you try to shove everything into your big data lake, all the data you've got, and think, I'm going to find a golden nugget, you will find a golden nugget, but it'll probably be less valuable than the cost of putting all the data there. So you need to make sure you pick your use cases and build up that architecture, that IoT platform that enables you to grow and make disciplined choices between different functional areas.
Okay.
I also think that companies like Microsoft and Amazon and others coming into this space actually will enable an easier conversation at a higher level in the organizations. There's a level of trust that those brands bring to those tiers of management. And so if they understand that the IoT program, whatever that program is that you're trying to roll into a company or a company's trying to roll forward, is sitting on those platforms, it brings a level of trust at board level, which makes it easier to have the conversation.
Okay. Now, another one here, and again, kind of on a technology track, would be what's the role of open source for software here? Is that just another personal opinion, right? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but so you blockchain, you have IoT platforms. They're all tools. They're not the answer in themselves. They're just it's how you use them and the business case around them. But open source, again, around the democratization of data, democratization of access to information. Thoughts?
Well, I'll jump in then. So for me, we're a big user of open source technology. So the analytics platform, which is what we have in Uniper, that we use on our own assets and clients' assets, that is all open source. And the reason for that is that technology set is generally advancing faster than stuff provided by a large corporate organization. Yes, you might have the licensing models and the backup, but actually these communities are much larger than the likes of Oracle and co. And I think even Microsoft are the largest contributor to Linux and Unix code development now, which gives you an idea of what these major players are thinking about. So for me, that plays a huge role, because these people who do this, and I have a lot of them who work for me, who spend their own time writing code, they're not driven by money and reward. They're driven by somebody using it and contributing to society. So the way I saw the question actually in the chat, that was how do we pay them back? For me, use it, make use of it, work with companies that are using it, because actually these people who make these things want people to use it to be recognized and feel like they're contributing towards society. And generally they're a group of people who have not got the same set of motivations as, bluntly speaking, this age range of this panel. They're of a younger and different mindset, and we've got to work with that, because those guys are the future, to be honest.
Okay. Just one, we spoke earlier about the implications of COVID and what we've seen. There's a question in here from Alberto in terms of what we have seen because of COVID-19 and let's say the accelerated use of digitalization. What have you guys seen? Is it more AI, IoT, or I suppose the main gist of the question is, are they just using what they've already have, or have they started rolling out new big strategic projects? my guess is well, it's only been 3 months, so my guess is they're just using what they found they had and were not using. But thoughts?
Yeah, I think they've just become used to the technology at a pretty base level for some people for the first time to really understand how digital technologies can help their business to run without having to have everyone congregate in a big building. And as a consequence of that, they're now understanding that perhaps these technologies can then be applied to other parts of their business. And I'm pretty sure there'll be plenty of senior executives in organizations now starting to have the thought bubbles go off in their heads that perhaps these technologies are not a bad thing and can probably make their businesses more effective. So that I've seen the effectiveness that's come from being able to have people working from home continue to be productive and output. They'll then be able to apply that same mindset to their other lines of their business and business activity.
Okay. Now there's probably another 15 open questions in here. I don't think we're going to get to all of them because we're running out in 10 minutes. And I want to come to the last question to all three of you is around, what do you call it, your words of wisdom and how do people start, or is it too late for everyone, whatever. But let me come to that in a second. There's one other question here I just wanted to throw up was, hydrogen has popped up here quite a bit. And to be honest, I'm kind of going, personal opinion, it's probably not going to happen in the morning. It's a kind of a longer term play. But if we look at the topic we're dealing with, right? How do you optimize energy production? How does digitalization, whatever? Where do you see hydrogen fitting into this in the future? Is it a piece of the puzzle or is it revolutionary?
It's a piece of the puzzle from my perspective. It's just another technology that will come into a mix of many technologies to deliver a working energy environment for customers and for the community. And hydrogen will have applications. Solar has applications. When each technology has specific applications, and they work well together or they work separately and independently to deliver the application. And I just think it's just another one that's coming.
Yeah, completely agree. So if you think about it, when maybe 10 years ago, when of course we knew we could do hydrogen with electrolysis and other organic methods, but every scientist and physicist would say, don't bother doing that. It's just completely energy efficient. You're wasting. I remember the chat about putting hydrogen in cars and people saying that'll never take off because it's just inefficient in terms of energy use. And it is. But what's changed is the point oversupply of renewables. So what do you do with that waste energy? Suddenly hydrogen becomes useful because it's a very good form of storage of energy in that sense when you've got an oversupply. And now the world's categorized them into green, brown, blue, pink even, which apparently is nuclear, which I learned about the other day. Yeah. So it has a piece to play, both in the sense of storage of energy, but also as we rightfully phase out all our coal assets, first Europe will go, then other parts of the world will follow. You say, how do we decarbonize our sector fully? There's still going to need to be some reliable generation. And that for me is hydrogen fueled. We've got gas turbines today. And in Uniper, we're making fairly large investments in that space. So we do become carbon neutral by 2035 in Europe. So we've got a hell of a long way to go. And we're making quite a lot of noise and investments about that as an option for the future for large scale generation. So a part to play in the puzzle, but it is a long way out, like 10 plus years, I think, for it to be properly commercially solid.
Yeah, I know that there's been huge advances in the electrolyzer technologies and whatever. And yeah, as you say, pump it into the car and transport it across Europe, and then the cost just becomes prohibitive. But when you see people looking at building massive wind farms in the North Sea, turning it into hydrogen, pumping it into the Ruhr Valley to power cement factories, total different business equation. And that does change things. Okay, I'm afraid there's a bunch more questions in here. We're going to have to come back to them afterwards with the IIoT team. We've covered some, but not all. I wanted to kind of, I suppose, come back to what we started out was, you know, using digital solutions to improve and optimize energy production. A lot of work has been done in all of these sectors that you're looking at in terms of where Uniper is, Brett, what you do with virtual power plants, Dalton around the whole consumer. It's not that people haven't done anything, but what would you say, given what you've seen in the past 3 months and years of experience, what would you say to your potential new customers in terms of, if you want to accelerate the using digital solutions, here's your words of wisdom. What would you tell them, Pete?
I'd say, okay, one, you've not missed the boat for the opportunity, and forgive me if that doesn't translate miss the boat. It just means you missed the opportunity. So you haven't missed the opportunity. Yeah, you're not too late to get value from digitalization. You are probably too late to try build this yourself now. There is enough expertise, companies, technology available for you to start using out there. The third thing I'd say is pick use cases. You really need to focus on the problem and the opportunity. It's not just about having a fancy chief digital officer or some digital program. It's about what problem are you trying to solve, and then look at the technology available to fix that. And for me, we found that us as Uniper as a business, we've been able to evolve through that path. It's not a silver bullet, and every asset and every problem is going to have a slight different nuance, but you need to handle those as they come through. And the fourth thing, which is where a lot of people get stuck, is the investment cases for these sorts of things are not typical to the industry. So the industry is very long-term orientated and generally builds large assets, large amounts of capital. Digital solutions generally have very fast paybacks, but they can have quite quick fails as well. And you've got to have a mindset of delivering these things within a year. And pretty much all of our solutions that we have put on our own assets and on clients' assets, they pay back within 6 months, sometimes quicker. 6 weeks is the fastest we've had. And occasionally you might get a year if an asset doesn't run very much, but the paybacks are very high with them when the engagement is there. So writing those business cases is not done in a typical way.
Okay. And Dalton, for folks looking at the whole, how do they tie back the whole energy consumer side into this world?
Yeah, what I used to say for my clients is don't hesitate to request whatever you want. We have enough technology to solve your problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology out there. That's true.
Yes. The main thing is the mindset and how to provide the solution for the problems. We have lots of technology. We just need to think about how to integrate a lot of things and build great stuffs.
Somebody make a decision. Yeah. Brett, folks looking at virtual power plants, where do they start?
Well, I think they have to try and understand what their energy future looks like for their business. They have to understand that they won't always be a taker of energy. If they're going to effectively participate, have their business become a good corporate citizen and drive down their footprint on the planet, then they will need to become a maker as well as a taker of energy. And then understanding that that's the path that you're on is working out how you're going to solve that problem, whether you're going to make the investment yourself or you're going to work with the bigger suppliers and write PPAs, etc. There's a range of business models evolving here, and you need to understand what business model is going to work best for the business type that you're running. And then, as Dalton said, there's plenty of solutions and technology out there to solve the problem. You just need to understand the economic model that you want to take forward as an organization around energy.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, folks. Before we finish up, thanks to everybody who answered the question, and you kind of touched it on there, Brett. Jack Montgomery asked, well, what is the future of energy? We probably need another 8-hour webinar to go through that one, because if anyone knows the answer to that question, let me know. I'll invest. But we'll follow up. We're not going to get to all the questions right now. Thank you for everybody. Before I hand back to Lucian or Carolina, thank you, Pete, Brett, Dalton, for your time. It's certainly the most worldwide panel I've been on in the recent weeks, with covering all sections of the globe. So thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
IIoT world, I think we have a draw to do.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So I will share the screen now. 1 second. Okay, and let's do, here are all the names. Let's see who's the winner.
Who's going to win?
So, okay, Alberto.
Let's get close then.
I was going to say.
Okay, it's Alberto Nerio. So we will get in touch with Alberto via email to get his physical address to send the book. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Hey, thank you very much, folks.